Hi, and welcome back to Continual. It's time for another episode of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight I am hanging out with the one and only Tom Doyle. Tom, say hi.
Hi, Jim. It's always great to talk science fiction, fantasy, whatever with you. And let's get to it. I love you know geeking out on the science fiction fantasy.
So, what are you bringing to everybody's to be listened to pile?
Well, it is to be listened to. It's I've been doing a series for graphic audio called Agent of Exiles, which is the supernatural adventures of secret agents in the 6th century BCE. So it's kind of like the old Wild Wild West show that had secret agents where you wouldn't expect them back in the Old West, except instead it's in ancient Persia, in Egypt, the Aegean. And so book two, graphic audio, like book two enough that now, book one enough rather, that they've got another book that's coming out at the end of March. And it looks like, oh, I'll have to call up that picture, but it's called Agent of Exiles, the Olympian Games. The first one was called The League of Set. And if the third one comes out, it'll be called India Match. And that's a homage to the old Berlin game, the Lee Denton spy trilogy of game, set, and match. So I tried to work those words into the titles for all of them. The first one starts with in ancient Babylon, and it goes to ancient Egypt. And the second one, which is coming out, will be in the ancient Aegean. So all the folks, Pythagoras and the Oracle of Delphi and everything you've ever heard of in ancient Greece will be involved. It's a lot of fun.
How'd you come up with the series? What drove you to go this path?
Yeah, well, I actually started. I saw a request, for a theme anthology for zombies in the ancient world, and so I did a short story that I did a kind of mashup of the fall of Babylon, the vision of Ezekiel, and the account of Herodotus about how both the account of Herodotus, how Babylon fell, and the biblical account of how Babylon fell, mashed them all together and made this short story and sent it off and introduced this character I had of Samuel Ben Yohanan, or Samuel Jackson, if you will. And he was a rogue secret agent for the Judean court in exile. And he came up with a scheme that would get his people home if he could deliver the city of Babylon to Cyrus the Great without much bloodshed. So I had this story, tried to sell it to the anthology. I was too late, tried to sell it around. No dice, didn't go anywhere. Then Graphic Audio came to me and was asking for pitches for original material for them, because they had previously done my American Craftsman books. And I said, well, I had this story and it ends on a kind of cliffhangery, slingshotty note. So I sent that to them, and along with a little outline of where I thought it would go. And they go, yes, this is exactly the sort of thing we are looking for. So I wrote that up, and I wrote 3 short books, 3 70,000 word books for them in the course of the recent unpleasantness when I had a lot of time on my hands. And that and so far they've done 2, and I'm very much hoping they'll continue to go to the third one, because that's ancient India, and that's the pulpiest one of them all. So we'll see.
So let's talk a little bit more about book 2.
Okay.
The world you pick it in. Kind of what's the setup you're working with here? What's everybody going to dive into with the story in the second book?
Well, with the second book, we have the spy master of Cyrus the Great is Croesus, is in the formerly rich as Croesus, and he has a personal vendetta against the Oracle of Delphi, and people may know that story. And he's sending these 2 secret agents, his top team, Samuel and the kind of unlikely frenemy Mernaz of the Flame, who's a one of the magi of Cyrus's court and a great secret agent in her own right. He's sending them into the Aegean both to scout out Greece as a potential opponent of Persia, but also to figure out what went wrong that led to his downfall and also the death of his son and heir. So they go there with these two missions. They have to, but they get caught by pirates. There are pirates. They stop in Sparta, and the Spartans want to kill them. And they had this thing called this sort of wrestling that was actually a fight, mostly a fight to the death or to the maiming, that this Pancreon that they used to do, and they have to get in one of those fights. They go to ancient Athens, which is under the tyranny of Pisistratus at this time, and get involved in the intrigues there. They go to the Eleusis and see the mysteries, and finally end up at Delphi, where they are up against. I kind of freely lift through translation from some character names from the James Bond stories. And so the villainess there, who's taken over the seat of the Pythia, is named Menirus, which means basically solitary or solitaire. And the person she took it over with is named what is it? Mr. Big, basically, in Greek. So the two characters from Live and Let Die are prominent in but not really, because things go a very different direction.
How'd you come up with the heroes for the story? Let's talk a little bit more about the heroes, the protagonists of the story. How'd you come up with those guys? Let's find out a little bit more about who we're going to be hanging out with in the adventure.
Yeah, so Samuel Ben Yohanan, I was thinking of a person who is very skilled and has been actually very active in keeping the Judean court and the Judean people safe from a number of threats, despite their living in exile. But he is also very much rogue and on his own agenda. And he, at the beginning of book one, he is not a good person. He is definitely fully anti-hero, as far as he has sacrificed too much and fought too hard and is very cynical and is willing to do anything at this point to close the deal to get his people home. And if it involves the death of others, he has to do it. He has to do it now. And but as we get to know him, and as when he has basically finishes that early mission and becomes he becomes indentured basically to being Cyrus's spy. It's a kind of a deal, an offer he can't refuse. So as he goes on in that, we find that he is, a broader human being and not as cynical as he starts. And part of that is that he's been given this minder, Mernaz of the Flame. She is the granddaughter of Zoroaster. So she comes from a very different yet, in the ancient world terms, somewhat similar religious background. I mean, there weren't that many monotheistic peoples running around in the ancient Near East at the time. And so, but she, has seen Samuel's act from the beginning and kind of seen through him at the beginning, and is not happy to be on this mission at all. And so we have the kind of classic buddy comedy setups of two people who do not like each other and yet have to work together and find a accommodation. And so she has certain supernatural gifts that she's able to that help the mission. Samuel's mostly has relied on talismans, objects of magic, and she is more natively gifted in that respect. And they, it's kind of a lot of banter, a lot of buddy comedy stuff, and but people who are very good at their jobs.
So let's talk a little bit more about the history of the world, because again, you're a bit of a history buff like I am. You kind of like the ancient stuff. What kind of research were you doing around the time period? What were you digging into to tell the story? What kind of nuggets did you pull out of the time period?
Oh, well, so most, for these first two books, it's Herodotus right at the core of this. And Herodotus talking about the 6th century is awesome, because it's not, when he gets to the actual Persian invasion of Greece, the Persian invasions, he's much more factual, because he's within, a generation, 2 generations of memory, so it's still, he's much more fact-based in those. But with the 6th century stuff, it's somewhat factual, there's some recollection, but he'll also tell every story, every good tale that he's ever heard about it. And that's golden. I don't care what the scholars say, I'm taking Herodotus at his word the whole time. So he tells, these stories I use are like the world's first Cinderella story, involving a shoe and the prince searching for, the pharaoh searching for who had the other shoe. She's in the story. She's 6th century. There's a story about Polycrates, who's the tyrant of Samos, and which is also where Pythagoras is living at this point. And there's a great the classic story of him and this that he got too lucky, and that and he knows the Pharaoh of Egypt, in Herodotus. So in my story, all these people know each other as well. When they go from place to place, word about them is getting ahead of them, because these ancient world people are talking amongst each other. And that's in Herodotus. The Polycrates luck story is a funny one. If I may, I'll just tell it. Yeah. So he's, in the story, his friend, the Pharaoh of Egypt, warns him, the gods don't like it when people get too fortunate. They, you're the nail that's sticking up at that point, and you will get pounded down. You might try inducing a little self-misfortune and see how that plays. And so Polycrates had this ring, this, green-gemmed ring that was valuable above all others to him. And so he took a ship out to sea, took off the ring, threw it into the deep water, left very sad, but hey, it's a good misfortune, that's necessary. Well, of course, you know stories, what's the sort of thing that's going to happen next. A fisherman goes out fishing and catches a huge fish, and he looks at this huge fish and goes, this is too much for a simple fisherman like me. This is something I got to present to the tyrant of Samos. So he presents the big fish, and, it's, prepared specially, and the tyrant Polycrates is cutting into it, and there's his ring. And at that point, the Pharaoh hears about this story, and he cuts off all ties. He goes, what's coming for him? I can't, because in the ancient world, bad luck was contagious, and misfortune. And when you're revving up, so in my story, I actually have a kind of supernatural luck engine that's working for Polycrates, a sort of, a charm but it's revving up, and the secret agents see that that's going, and they try to tell him, this has got to stop, your run of luck, but he's not hearing it. In fact, he's acquired these agents as part of his good fortune, and he's just going to keep them there like all his other things that he acquires through his good luck. And so they're not that empathetic with what's going to come happen to him, but they're and what's going to happen to him is utterly unpleasant, and I won't even describe it here. But it's in the book.
Well, we don't want to spoil everything yet.
No. But Herodotus spoiled it a long time ago. So there's, but yeah. So that's an example of there's a story Herodotus tells. It's, it has the elements of fable and everything, but it has these historical personages in it. I take the story and go, yes, that's what's happening, and here's why, and here's how my characters get involved in it.
So what else was there? Was there something when you were doing the research, you just were like, okay, I'm going to jump down the research rabbit hole. This is a fun thing to go play with. This is a fun thing to discover. Something else that you just looked at, even if it didn't quite make it in the book.
I didn't make it. There are all sorts of details that I could have gotten into with Athens at the time. Athens alone, the whole book could have just been in the intrigues of Athens, because Pisistratus and his sons have these wonderful stories about them. And I just have to take the tip of the iceberg, because once Pisistratus, the tyrant of Athens, dies, his sons take over, and they get involved in these romantic intrigues that lead to these two lovers who kill one of the sons because he was like harassing one of the guys, one of the pair. And that leads to a revolution that throws the tyrants out. And that's the start of Athenian democracy. But that's all after my time. I have to take this narrow snapshot and merely allude to the sort of personality attributes that are going to go in there. Yeah, there's so much story and so little that trying to cram it all. I think I cram a lot in, so it would be cramming a lot of let's say dirt into the 10 pounds of dirt into the 5-pound bag to even put more in, because it's all there. To a certain extent, I am a magpie, and I just found all the shiny bits I could in Herodotus and elsewhere, and they all went in.
And there's a lot more to sift through in the stories. What else do you think we need to know about the series and about book 2?
I would say that the important thing is there are all these references, but this is also as pulpy as I've gotten. So you do not need to know the references beforehand. You can just read it like Conan, as far as, there's, I could be talking about, the Ultima Thule, and all the lands of after the Atlantis went under the ocean and blah blah blah. But there's the bonus that all the people and places and dates are right, but you don't have to know this to enjoy it. It's enjoyable in the same way that something like Wild Wild West was enjoyable without knowing anything about the history of the United States, because people are doing pulpy things. There are fights, there's romance, there's intrigue, it's adventure. And so the references are Easter eggs for those who enjoy the classical world and can get a chuckle out of how I use the stuff, but not necessary.
Well, Tom, can't wait to catch this one. Let everybody know where they can find you, websites, social media, all that kind of good stuff. And also maybe about American Craftsman as well.
Oh, yeah. So I am on tomdoyleauthor.com. So you can find a website. Even with all the social media stuff going on, that website will remain. So you'll always be able to find me there. I am also on the usual places, still on Twitter, on Facebook. You can find this work is available through the graphic audio site. Book 2 will be available, graphicaudio.net, at the end of March. And then a couple weeks later, it'll go on to audible.com. So if you have your Audible credits, they have also done audio version of my American Craftsman trilogy, which is Magician, Soldiers, and Psychic Spies in the Very Modern World. And those books, you can, they're still out there, it's, I think Tor moved them all onto print on demand, so they're still in all the formats you could want them: audio, print, ebook. And I am republishing my Twisted Space Opera Border Crosser soon. I'm having new cover art generated. Unfortunately, with Eric Flint's passing, his small press, Ring of Fire, has gone out of business. And that was the publisher of Border Crosser. It's been sad. It has, though, also forced me to do some things that I wanted to do for the cover, for representing the book to people. And it's that I will be out this year, a new version, new cover, new everything. It should look very nice when I'm done with it. And that will be available again as print on demand, as ebook. Maybe I'll even get around to doing an audio this time. So those are the big things, and we'll see if, I'm hoping book 3 will also be out later this year, of Agent of Exiles. That goes to India, of which Herodotus only had one thing to say, that they had giant gold-digging ants. Once again, I take Herodotus at his word. There are now giant gold-digging ants in India. And since it involves gold, and since I'm drawing upon the Bond mythos, among other things, the villain in that one is in Hindi named Finger of Gold. Because, of course. So,
well,
yeah.
Hopefully his first name is Auric.
Yeah. Nice. Deep cut. Good.
Tom, it's always a pleasure. You guys can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll see you guys again soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.